Thursday Night Football is on, and it's only on Prime Video. This week, the AFC North takes center stage as the Pittsburgh Steelers battle the Cincinnati Bengals. Coverage begins at 7 p.m. Eastern with football's best party, TNF Tonight, presented by Verizon. Not a Prime member? Not a problem. Simply sign up for a 30-day free trial. It's the Steelers and Bengals, Thursday at 7 p.m. Eastern, only on Prime Video. Restrictions apply. See Amazon.com/Amazon Prime for details.
This episode is brought to you by Progressive Insurance. Do you ever think about switching insurance companies to see if you could save some cash? Progressive makes it easy. Just drop in some details about yourself and see if you're eligible to save money when you bundle your home and auto policies. The process only takes minutes, and it could mean hundreds more in your pocket. Visit Progressive.com after this episode to see if you could save. Progressive Casualty Insurance Company and Affiliates. Potential savings will vary. Not available in all states.
Welcome to Orioles on the Verge. This is Zach Spedden, joined as always by Bob Phelan and Nick Stevens. And on tonight's episode, we're going to break down what went wrong with the Orioles pitching staff in 2025 and how it might look better in 2026. We're also going to break down the future role of Grayson Rodriguez with this team and get into one prospect who is performing very well in the early goings of the Arizona Fall League. And that'll all be on tonight's episode. But first, as we like to do, always at the beginning of an episode of Orioles on the Verge, we want to welcome a new member to our Patreon community. And for that, I will turn it over to Bob.
Yeah, thank you to Kevin Gracie, who signed up for the AA level for a year up front. So that's awesome. Again, just like I said last week, in the offseason, the beginning of the offseason hasn't even started yet. And so a dead time, basically, for us in baseball, just recapping and projecting what could happen going forward. It's greatly appreciated. And like I said last week, if you want that, an Elvin Garcia first Bowman card, hit me up on the patron chat or on Discord, and I'll send it out to you. So, yeah, thanks, Kevin.
Absolutely. And we might have some bonus coverage here in the next few weeks for our patrons, but don't forget that now we're only about 6 or 7 weeks out from the beginning of our top 50 countdown leading up to the 2026 season. So that's a very good reason to join our Patreon community. We might have more coming your way in a little bit here in the next few weeks. Let's now get into the Orioles pitching staff. And if you listened to last week's episode, you know that the pitching staff was not the entire problem in the 2025 season. There was plenty of blame to be distributed to the offense, which especially struggled in the second half of this season. With the pitching staff, I think we know the story by now because it's been very well documented. The first 2 months were terrible. And then it took a while after that for them to find its footing. And then the starting rotation, as we got further into the year, seemed to get better with Trevor Rogers' emergence, plus Kyle Braddis and Tyler Wells coming back from Tommy John surgery late in the season. But at the same time, we also know that the Orioles are left with a big hole in the back of their bullpen with Felix Bautista expected to miss most, if not all, of the 2026 season. So we're going to break down the starting rotation and the bullpen tonight. And then Grayson Rodriguez, who missed all of 2025, is going to be the subject to discussion a little bit later on. But just getting to some of the numbers here with the Orioles pitching staff this past season. Their 4.6 ERA, ranked as fifth worst in MLB, tied with the Marlins, was well above the league average of 4.15. And you look at their peripherals, they were not a whole lot better. 4.41 FIP. The pitching staff is essentially middle of the pack in strikeouts and walks, and actually ranked as the worst in the American League until August. Now, you can look at that as a turning point because, as I just mentioned a moment ago, Braddis came back in late August from his Tommy John surgery that cost him a lot of 2024 and a big chunk of 2025. Wells came back about a week later in early September. And by that point, Trevor Rogers was settled into what was a really dominant stretch in 2025. But Rogers did not settle into the rotation permanently until mid-June. So you get the sense that the Orioles rotation, which had some question marks coming into the year and then had a lot of issues exposed because of the injuries to Rodriguez and Zach Eflin, and the inconsistencies of some of their pitchers when they were on the mound, really led to a lot of problems for this team. And it's probably the area that is the biggest concern going into this offseason. And Nick, I'll start with you. let's look back at 2025. A lot went wrong. Was it, though, an issue of the Orioles not building enough depth before the season started? Too many things going wrong at the same time, or maybe a combination of both?
I think this conversation is a lot easier to have than the hitting one we did last week, just because with the hitting, there's a lot to unpack. Everyone has kind of their own theories about what went wrong, merit to a lot of those theories as well. But I think when it comes down to pitching, it was largely like injuries and poor roster construction just from the start. Like the pitching was never going to be good and not great, at least as far as the rotation is concerned. By the time the season started, like maybe you can keep this team competitive until a trade is made, until Bradish comes back. Earlier in the year, there was optimism, of course, that Grayson Rodriguez would return. So like you could just keep this team afloat. Obviously, as we mentioned coming into the year, like projections thought this offense would be a top 2, top 3 offense in the league. So can this rotation just keep the team afloat until reinforcements arrive? But as you just mentioned, like they didn't. 2 months in, this team was clearly trending out of it. The injuries start to pile up. Like Sugano and Charlie Morton made 30% of the team starts this season, and like they weren't great. They got throwing a pile on Charlie Morton. You had a great career. Congratulations. We talked about Sugano the other week. Relying on a 41-year-old who knew his time was up and a 36-year-old rookie from Japan. Like that's for 30% of your starts is tough. But as we'll talk about or hint at is like our initial little look at the offseason is I think there's some good quality starters here in free agency. A lot of options look like becoming available in the trade market as well. So no excuse to go into 2026 the same way you went into 2025, which was just not prepared for the season, I think, on the pitching front.
Yeah, I guess you go into the season, you're counting on Grayson Rodriguez, or going into spring training, I should say, counting on Grayson Rodriguez, Zach Eflin. You bring in Kyle Gibson late in the game. You have Dean Kramer, obviously Sugano, Povich, and let's see, Dean Kramer, first month of the season, had a 7.04 ERA. Charlie Morton had a 9.45 ERA. Grayson obviously hurt, never pitches. Eflin, I think he started okay, but battled injuries and poor performance all season long, probably due to the nagging injuries. And yeah, Sugano was the only guy early in the season that was pitching well consistently, and that's just not enough, especially when you also add on that the offense struggled and yada yada that we talked about last week. But from a starting pitching front, we knew that Bradish, Wells, and we're going to be hurt at least until this late in the second half of the season. Rogers was obviously in AAA trying to get him back, and I think didn't he even have a little bit of a delayed start with some minor injury as well, but I can't remember exactly. But yeah, so you had to count on these guys like Morton and Kramer to just pitch well enough to keep you in games, and hopefully the offense could steal a few until guys started to get healthy and Brandon Youngs of the world were ready. Cade Povich could maybe take a step up, and it didn't happen. The starting pitching especially was so bad early on that we dug ourselves into the giant hole that we've talked about plenty this year. I do think that maybe in hindsight, obviously, maybe Morton and Sugano weren't the two guys that you needed just to get into playoff contention. You should have done a little bit better in hindsight, clearly, but we saw what they were going for. We talked about it a lot heading into the season, and clearly it just did not work out. And Kramer goes on to have a really good season after the first month or so, and Morton as well, but the hole was just way too big to dig out of.
Yeah, those are all good points, Bob. And I remember preseason saying that I thought that what the Orioles were trying to do with their pitching staff was buy time. They thought that 30 starts of Zach Eflin, 30 starts of Grayson Rodriguez, and 30 starts of typical Charlie Morton or Dean Kramer performance would be enough to get them through. And if they needed to go out and get a top of the rotation arm at the deadline, they would do that, or they would get something close to the top of the rotation arm. But by the time really June 1st rolled around, they were so far out of it that they were not going to be buying at the deadline. And you can look at what Morton did over the first month, and you can look at what Kramer did over the first month as part of the problem. But at the same time, you just mentioned Cade Povich and Brandon Young. Both of those guys had some real inconsistencies at the major league level this year. Yet at the same time, I think that was a situation where both players were pressed into action much more and much sooner than the Orioles would have liked. I mean, going into the camp, we were talking about both of those guys in Norfolk's rotation. Then Albert Suarez gets hurt. That's another injury the Orioles had early on in the year. And Povich has a good spring training. So it's like, okay, Cade Povich looks like he belongs, but Brandon Young's going to need a little bit of time in Norfolk. He had, less than a month before his major league debut? So that was just kind of the circumstance the Orioles dug themselves into. And it goes back to the point that Nick made a minute ago, which is just poor roster construction. And before we even get into the bullpen, where I know there are going to be a lot of moves this offseason with the rotation, that has to be a priority this offseason, is build a rotation that, if nothing else, doesn't dig you the hole that last year's rotation did after a couple of guys went down.
Yeah, that's true. I also just feel like the depth automatically, just a year later, is going to be so much better, because if we just look at our coverage from all year around, like the guys that are going to start in AAA in 2026 are a much deeper and more capable group of pitchers, even if they obviously, I think at this day and age, you can't expect any pitcher to come up and have immediate success. You're going to have to take your lumps. But guys like Cameron Weston, Trey Gibson, Nestor Erman, Levi Wells, et cetera, Michael Ferret, Young, Povich, again, the depth alone is going to be much better this year, which is why I think you kind of want to go and get mid to top of the rotation level guy or two, just to stabilize that. Like you said, you want to get off to a good start in 2026. I think that's going to be a big goal for this team. And yeah, maybe it's risky, but I think with that depth that you do have, take the risk and get a guy that has a little more high-end potential that can help push us over that little hump that we need to get over.
Yeah, like if you have to start with Brandon Young and Cade Povich in Norfolk this year, great. Even better. And I don't even know, like, I don't have any firm opinion. I didn't really dive into him or anything in preparation for this tonight, but like, what is the vibe with Povich going into 2026? How are we feeling about him and what he showed this year?
I feel good personally. I think he definitely had one of the most unlucky BABIPs I've seen in quite some time this year. For the season, his BABIP against was, where is it on here? Why is it not on the first? It's 350. 350. It's 324 for his career, but 350 this year. And I think that went down on the last start of the season. For a while, I feel like it was above that, but also a 13.4% home run to fly ball rate. So a little on the upper end of that as well. I think his FIP was 418, XFIP 395. So the 5.21 ERA, it doesn't really tell the whole story. I think his stuff and his whole like pitch mix looked a lot better. He looked a lot more confident to me on the mound. I would expect him to be in that low to mid 4 ERA if he got full-time innings again. Yeah, I think there was a lot to like. It just seemed like he might have had like a poor inning early on and then would cruise, and then he would always hit the wall third time through the order this year, it seemed like. So if he could just maybe improve just enough to clear that bar, I think we're looking at a back end of the rotation starter, maybe mid of the rotation starter, if he can really take another jump or two, whether it's velocity or what have you.
I kind of see back of the rotation starter ceiling at this point. And if you were a team that, was rebuilding going into 2026, I think you'd feel great having Cade Povich around, knowing he's a guy that's not going to cost you a whole lot, and that there were some real positives in his trends from 2024 to 2025. At the same time, though, I don't know if the Orioles, if they're really trying to get over the hurdles that they face in 2025, if they're going to feel good about their roster, if they go into spring training with Cade Povich penciled into the rotation. So I kind of see for the Orioles that Povich is either somebody you dangle out there in a trade to see if you can get a pitcher back, or he's good AAA depth. And I talked about this on an episode recently. I think one of the problems the Orioles had this year was that when they were in an emergency situation where they needed a starter, there were not a lot of good options in Norfolk, especially the later you got into the season. And while there are a lot of good young prospects that are probably going to be pitching the Tide's rotation next year, do you want to call up Trey Gibson, Nestor Amon, Levi Wells, or maybe even Cameron Weston for that matter, in an emergency in April? Or would you rather have a Cade Povich down there to fill in for that spot? So that's kind of, in my ideal, even though I was encouraged by something I saw with Povich this year, if he's going to be an Oriole going into 2026, ideally that's the role that I want him in.
Yeah, I agree with that. I think in my first offseason, dream offseason piece, I had Cameron Weston. No, Cade Povich going to the Twins in that trade that was bringing back Pablo Lopez and Byron Buxton. I think he could be a really good trade chip this offseason if a team is looking for a major league ready starting pitcher to insert into the rotation for the next 4 or 5 years. And I think Povich could be that guy. If someone's looking for something a little more consistent or reliable, I think Kramer could be that guy. He's under control for 2 more years relatively cheaply. But yeah, I think Povich is either best used as a trade chip or first guy up from AAA. I think it's his last option year, so you might as well make the most of that. And hopefully he develops enough in 2026. Even if he does start the year in AAA, I'm sure he will probably get 15 to 20 starts, even if you have 5 guys ahead of him going into the season. And hopefully at that point, he would be ready to take over permanently in a rotation spot in 2027, if all goes well.
Let's go over now to talk about how the Orioles could pursue upgrades to the rotation this offseason. We talked about this a little bit with the class of hitters last week, where it's a very top-heavy group. And when you get beyond that top tier, which on the offensive side is probably Kyle Tucker, Peter Alonso, Alex Bregman, Cody Bellinger, and Kyle Schwarber, that there's not necessarily a whole lot there. With starting pitchers, Framber Valdez is the class of the market. And then when you get beyond that, it starts to thin out a lot. You don't have a Corbin Burns, Blake Snell combination or Max Fried thrown in there this offseason. It is very top-heavy. Now, Framber Valdez is a pitcher that a lot of Orioles fans have their eyes on for a few reasons. He's had some very good seasons in Houston over the last few years. Obviously, there's the Astros connection with Mike Elias in this front office, and it would be a solid left-hander to have at the top of the rotation. Yet, as you have both alluded to, there do seem to be some good options on the trade market for the Orioles if they choose to go that route. So how do you guys feel the Orioles could and should look for rotation upgrades this offseason?
This episode is brought to you by Progressive Insurance. Fiscally responsible, financial geniuses, monetary magicians. These are things people say about drivers who switch their car insurance to Progressive and save hundreds. Because Progressive offers discounts for paying in full, owning a home, and more. Plus, you can count on their great customer service to help you when you need it, so your dollar goes a long way. Visit Progressive.com to see if you could save on car insurance. Progressive Casualty Insurance Company and Affiliates. Potential savings will vary. Not available in all states or situations.
Thursday Night Football is on, and it's only on Prime Video. This week, the AFC North takes center stage as the Pittsburgh Steelers battle the Cincinnati Bengals. Can the Steelers' defense dominate once again? The Steelers bring experience and that signature toughness. The Bengals, they've got young stars and explosive playmakers. It's discipline versus firepower. Exactly what makes this division one of the toughest in football. Coverage begins at 7 p.m. Eastern with football's best party, TNF Tonight, presented by Verizon. Not a Prime member? Not a problem. Simply sign up for a 30-day free trial. It's the Steelers and Bengals, Thursday at 7 p.m. Eastern, only on Prime Video. Restrictions apply. See Amazon.com/Amazon Prime for details.
I mentioned last week how I think you probably spend the money towards pitching and trade for the impact bat if you want it. But yeah, there are a ton of, it looks like on a daily basis there's someone else, like legitimate reports about so and so could be on the move. So we'll see on the trade front. But like on the rotation side, like I don't know, like if the Orioles go out and like they don't get Framber Valdez or they don't get that true ace, whatever that is, may be, however you may define that. Like I still think you can drastically upgrade this rotation. I know that's a low bar to clear, but you can still create like a high quality playoff worthy rotation here without, the true top of the class guy. I think bring in a couple of these guys instead, but yeah, well, like Framber is still my top target, I think, this offseason. I don't know if anyone still has any strong opinions at this point about the incident and what impact that has. I know Mark Feinstein, MLB, had an article just the other day, actually, and he got a lot of quotes from MLB executives, and those quotes seem like the tone has softened a lot from the executive quotes that came out right after the incident of, oh, we've crossed him off our list. It's going to heavily impact his market. And now everybody's like, at least a lot of the quotes in that article were like, yeah, he is the top of the class. No one else in this class has been as consistent for as long as he has. And the stuff is clearly like, if you want to nitpick that second half of the season, maybe dive into that a little bit more valid, because he wasn't great down the stretch. But like that incident, I don't think is going to have a huge impact on his market. He's still going to get a monster deal. And yeah, you got that connection there with Elias, was the director of scouting in Houston when Valdez was signed. Eve Rosenbaum, I believe, was working in the international scouting department with the Astros as well at the time. So clearly, if I imagine he's on the Orioles list as well. And I like Cease and King. I think those are two of the other bigger names, Suarez as well. But Cease and King, like either one of the Padres guys, I'm down. Like King doesn't have the long major league track record as a starter. He's coming off that injury-filled season, but it was shoulder, and then it was like a knee issue when he came back from the shoulder. It seemed like that was behind him. Dennis Lin kind of thinks in some of his latest writing I was checking out that it seems like both guys are going to enter free agency. Cease, to me, is a guy who I could see why you'd be hesitant and maybe wanted to bring Cease in, but like, again, Feinstein had another article specifically looking at Dylan Cease, and a lot of the quotes were like, he's a true 5 and dive guy. At this point, you get a little worried once she gets past the 6th inning, which he rarely got into the 6th inning. Only like 11 of his 32 starts he worked into the 6th inning. But I mean, he's got 2 top 4 Cy Young finishes in the last 5 years. Very few pitchers in baseball strike out more guys than Dylan Cease does. I think there's a quote in there about the stuff is still fantastic, but the command isn't. That's something that I think you can tweak a little bit. And I think Cease would still be a pretty decent option. And yeah, if he slots in behind Kyle Bradish, like we still have a healthy Kyle Bradish going into next year to slot at the top of the rotation. So like I'd be fine with bringing in a Dylan Cease or a Michael King to slot in behind Bradish, and then, trade for a mid rotation guy, for example. But yeah, I think there's some good quality options here in the free agent class to target.
Yeah, I agree. Obviously, I think Framber Valdez is the cream of the crop, but I have to admit I have cooled on him a little bit after that incident, plus the way he finished the season not too strongly. I would still be excited if we signed him, but I think the difference between him and Ranger Suarez, Dylan Cease, Michael King is not as much as maybe it just seems like, just with name value and on paper. But I also think there's some other interesting guys you could sign that, depending on what else you do in the offseason, could work. You have Dustin May. He's 28 years old, hitting the free agent market, obviously been injury riddled. I still will never understand why the Red Sox traded so much for him for 2 months, only to not really much came of that. You also have Merrill Kelly as an option, older, 37, but I think if you're looking at a 1 or 2 year deal, could be interesting. Zach Gallen, he finished pretty strong last year in the second half. I could see that being like a bounce back candidate. Maybe if he doesn't get the qualifying offer with the Diamondbacks, maybe he could get a 1 or 2 year deal. Jack Flaherty, another guy who I think could be interesting as a mid rotation guy, but yeah, if not one of them, then I think you got to go the trade route. And I'm interested to hear who Zach thinks we could potentially go after on that market.
Yeah, and I'm going to actually, I'll just go into that now, and then I'll ask my question about Dylan Cease. The one guy that I keep coming back to that I think the Orioles might go after is Joe Ryan. Coming off a very good season in Minnesota, only 29 years old. If you're looking for a strikeout pitcher, Ryan is probably your guy. 194 strikeouts and 171 innings last year in Minnesota. And to top that off, 84th percentile in strikeout rate last season, and 87th percentile in walk rate. So he doesn't walk a lot of guys, and he racks up a lot of strikeouts. One of the problems he had this past season was that when hitters made contact, which was not a whole lot, they did tend to barrel the baseball, but still very good numbers for him overall last year in Minnesota. 171 innings across 30 starts with 194 strikeouts to 39 walks, a 3.42 ERA, and a 3.74 FIP. You could debate what Ryan's next 2 seasons are going to look like, because that's what you would be getting if you trade for Joe Ryan, is 2 years of team control. Does he build on this season and look like a top of the rotation arm, or is there more of a mean to his numbers where he's a solid number 2 behind Kyle Bratis, if Bratis is healthy? And that's a very legitimate question, but in my mind, with the Twins in a position where they're probably going to be selling this offseason, you should make that call. Go out and see what you can get for him. And I do think that the Twins are an ideal trade partner for the Orioles, because that farm system needs a little bit of a boost, and they have 2 very good arms that they could deal this offseason, and Ryan and Pablo Lopez, not to mention Byron Buxton, who could be a real jolt to the Orioles lineup and take over center field for them on a daily basis. That's the starter there. But then what's interesting is that with Lopez and Ryan, you're really looking at 2 different trade packages in my mind, because Lopez has a couple of guaranteed years left on his contract, and it's not a lot of money, but we saw the Twins trade Carlos Correa at the deadline last year to shed some of their long-term payroll obligations. Their ownership situation's in flux right now, so it seems like they maybe want to offload some long-term deals. So the Orioles could potentially get Lopez, take on a lot of that contract, and not have to give up that much in terms of prospect depth. Joe Ryan's a little bit different story, because he'll go through arbitration over the next 2 years, perhaps not cost as much salary-wise, but you're going to have to give up more in prospects to get him, which is where I think the real question is do you bank on the idea that 2025 was a springboard for Joe Ryan to be as good, if not better, over the next 2 years, in which case top of your rotation is solidified, or is he more of a mid-tier starter who happened to have a good season?
Yeah, I would love to get Joe Ryan for sure. I think he's a great target. The only reason that I have us project to get Pablo Lopez is just because the cost, I think, will be, I don't know about significantly less, but definitely less than Joe Ryan, especially with the injury concerns with Pablo this past season. I think he'd be a great target depending on what the cost was. I also think there was a report that Hunter Green could be available because the Reds might be looking to increase their hitting. So I don't know. That's just tantalizing to me. A guy like Hunter Green, who's under contract for, I think, 4 more years plus a team option for a 5th more a season. Obviously, I think he's already had Tommy John, hard throwing guy, ace level stuff. I think that would also take a huge deal to acquire him. But I don't know. Maybe if you do a Cade Povich, maybe if you really want to mix things up on the offensive side with Jordan Westberg, maybe potentially in a deal like that. I don't know. But that would be interesting to me. And my guy still interested in Shane Baz from Tampa Bay, if they are willing to deal him as he's getting more expensive. He didn't have the greatest season coming off of his injury in 2025, but I still like the pitch mix, the upside there. And maybe you can get Pete Fairbanks thrown in as the closer for 2026, even though I kind of hate that guy.
Yeah, the Ryan stuff, I mean, either of the Twins arms they they had a deal with the Red Sox worked out or something, or somebody, one of the Red Sox beat writers had said what the package was going to look like for Joe Ryan in Boston. I think it involved like Duran and someone else, one of their top pitching prospects. But I mean, Orioles have a lot of young, controllable, cheap bats that are major league ready, the major league rush that they could use as well in these deals. So yeah, that can make a lot of sense as well. I like the Joe Ryan idea because that would also signify a fun change in philosophy, I think, in the type of players that this organization acquires. Like, because when I'm looking at trade options, I instantly go to, well, it's going to be Pablo Lopez because you can just eat that salary, or it's a Sonny Gray. Yeah, he's older, but like I think he already said that he's going to be willing to waive the no trade clause this offseason. And you're like, oh, for sure, that's an easy trade target. Just eat a bunch of that salary. Kind of on a grander scale than the Orioles did at the trade deadline to acquire better talent. But the Joe Ryan idea, yeah, it's like we said, you've got the firepower. And I don't know, in thinking about instead of spending money on this free agent class as well, all of the guys, Fromber, Cease, King, potentially, like a lot of these guys, Ranger Suarez, even, you're going to have the qualifying offer discussion as well there too. So how much of a hindrance is that going to be? So I don't know, but yeah, I like the Joe Ryan idea.
Yeah, it is worth noting that some of the bigger bats that are going to be available this offseason are not going to be subject to qualifying offer, including Cody Mellinger, because they've gotten it previously in their career. I think Pete Alonso is under the same restriction, but with the pitching staff, it's going to be something to consider. Now, before we move on to the bullpen, I just want to go back to Dylan Cease for a moment. The last two off seasons, we have heard the Orioles connected in trade rumors to Dylan Cease. First, it was before the 2024 season. Cease was with the White Sox at that time, and that was kind of seen by everybody as the target of the offseason. The Orioles did go out and get a number one starter then, but it was Corbin Burns, not Dylan Cease. The White Sox ended up holding on to Cease until spring training, then trading him to the Padres. Last year, the rumor is the Padres want to offload salary. Cease is 1 year away from free agency, so they're going to move him, and the Orioles are one of the top targets in trade talks. Nothing ever happens. I think there were some reports out there that the Padres may have been asking for Jordan Westburg or some major league ready pieces back in the deal, but whatever was reported out there, the bottom line is that a trade did not happen. Do you think that maybe the Orioles aren't as interested in Dylan Cease as everybody thinks they should be? Or do you think they maybe have been on him the last 2 years and for whatever reason just haven't been able to get a deal done? Because that's really going to affect the viability in my mind of him becoming an Oriole this offseason in free agency, because either now they can go get him and not have to negotiate with another team for a trade, or they haven't been interested all along and they're content to let him go somewhere else.
I think he fits the mold of what the Orioles would be interested in. I would not be surprised if they're a big player on him, and obviously it has to be the right price, I'm sure. Maybe he's a guy they'd be willing to do the Corbin Burns thing where it's like, we're going to offer you more per year, but on like a 3 or 4 year deal rather than 5, 6, whatever. I think on the trade front, I think it was just value differences. That's why trades are hard. Like, if you're interested in someone, it doesn't mean you're going to give up whatever it takes to get them. So, yeah, I would say they're probably interested, and I wouldn't be surprised if he was the guy that the Orioles end up signing. I think he's a guy, high upside, clearly volatile, some inconsistency, but throws hard, has a great slider. If you can maybe just tinker around a little bit, you get some more consistency out of him and maximize his value.
Strikeouts are king. Like that's what you want. And he piles them up. It's the last 5 years. Yeah. Last 5 seasons. The fewest number of strikeouts he has in a season is 214. I don't know how many top Orioles pitcher got this year, but I think you'd have to add a couple guys from the Orioles rotation to get 214 from this year. Like, and it's look, if he's just a 5 and dive guy, I'm okay with that. If for those 5 innings, like this is baseball in 2025. If for those 5 innings, he's averaged what, 10.5 to 11.5 strikeouts per 9 innings over the last 5 seasons, if he's going to do that, then yeah, I think I agree. I think he completely fits the mold. I think the Orioles are going to be pretty big players in there with Cease. Honestly, if it's between like Cease or King, I would imagine I would see them being more interested in Cease.
By the way, the Orioles leader in strikeouts last year with Dean Kramer was 142 in 171 and 2/3 innings pitched. So, Nick, as you talked about, that really would be breaking the mold with what we've seen from the Orioles rotation, at least in recent years. Now, let's move on to the bullpen. I think overall the bullpen held its own last season, even with a lot of the moves that were made to deadline, trading guys like Sir Anthony Dominguez, Gregory Soto, and Andrew Kittredge. And then Felix Bautista goes down a few weeks after the deadline with a shoulder injury that's going to put him out for most of, if not all of 2026. It looks like August of 26 is the earliest that we'll see Felix Bautista on a major league mound again. So while the Orioles were able to get through the final weeks of a season in which they were not contending using some of their existing options as a closer, we know that's not really going to work over a full season in 2026. And Bob, I want to start with you here because in your piece over at Substack recently, oriolesonthebirds.substack.com, you put together your dream offseason and you tabbed a guy for closer that is coming off of a bad season, but has had a lot of success in the past.
Yeah, I'm all in on Devin Williams. I think, yeah, he definitely struggled in the Bronx with the Yankees this year. But again, just so unlucky. His metrics are all like his stuff hasn't waned at all. His stuff plus is still a 114 combined. His changeup's a 125 on its own. He had a 4.79 ERA, but a 3.07 expected ERA, 2.68 FIP, 2.95 xFIP, was striking out. Yeah, maybe not quite as much batters per nine or percentage. 34.7% is the lowest since he debuted in 2019, but he also walked less than he had since the shortened 2020 season with just under 10% of batters. So I think he's just as good as he's ever been. He's just turned 31 years old. I would have no problem signing him to 3-4 year deal for decent money, especially if his price is down a little bit after that season, which probably not. I think teams are smart enough to know that. But yeah, Devin Williams would be my top target for closer, as I'm sure a lot of teams are. And Ryan Helsley as well. I know he struggled mightily once he went to the Mets, but just another guy who's 31 years old. Stuff is still ridiculous. Like, give me one of those two powerhouse arms for the back of the rotation.
Who didn't struggle in the second half Mets?
True. Yeah, that's the only thing with like the bullpen you can piece together kind of cheaply. Like there weren't a ton of guys. I think that like Dietrich Enns showed some solid stuff. I think he could be a factor. Cade Stroud, I'm very interested to see if Cade Stroud is for real or not. I mean, yeah, he's an older arm. He's 28, 29 years old now, but only 13 walks in 26 innings. That's a big improvement from, I think, what we've seen from him in the past. But he 1.71 ERA when he was up, he was really solid. But there's no one like that. There's no one internally that you can look to as like this guy or this guy could be solid, like ninth inning guys for this team. So I think that has to be a pretty big priority is who's going to lock down games for this team, because I don't see any internal options. You can look, and we all love Tyson Neighbors. Tyson Neighbors very likely is not going to be closing games for the Baltimore Orioles at the major league level next year, especially if this team wants to contend. I hope to see him in the major leagues, but probably not as the closer. I think that is one of the bigger priorities, is that lockdown closer. And then the bullpen, you've got a couple of intriguing pieces already, and like even the best teams, they're going to piece together the rest of the bullpen pretty cheaply, waiver wire finds, keen free agent signings. Yeah, but it's the closer.
Exactly. Yeah, I think we definitely need a closer. I'm pretty happy with the depth of the bullpen options. I don't really see like Rico Garcia, Dietrich Enns, Colin Selby, Cade Stroud. These guys I think could be, Grant Wolfram even could be really solid middle to semi back end relievers, like seventh inning, eighth inning potentially, and the guys in the minors I think could eventually develop into closer type guys. But yeah, for 2026, 2027, I think you're going to need to go out and get that guy.
Yeah, and I will say this, that we've debated now with the rotation in the lineup. Do you go the trade or the free agent route to improve that area this offseason? In my mind, as the bullpen, it's free agency because you do have Devin Williams out there. You've got enough decent relievers available that you could find this offseason's Andrew Kittredge. And that signing is one that objectively worked for the Orioles, even though he missed a lot of times in injury. He pitched well when he was healthy, and they were able to flip him to get a good prospect at the deadline. And let's face it, if the Orioles have been contending, they probably would have already picked up their club option for 2026. So that's a move that they can repeat this offseason with a similar pitcher and expect it to work. Danny Coulomb was out there. I would not mind seeing a reunion with him. I would even not mind seeing a reunion with Sir Anthony Dominguez. So there's a lot of paths the Orioles could take this offseason to improve the bullpen, but I think a lot of those moves are going to have to come through free agency and the waiver wire, partially because you want to save some of your trade assets for the rotation and for the lineup, but then also because there's enough on the market this offseason that you can go that route.
Yeah, I agree. I'm not trading for a reliever, especially in the offseason. Yeah, trade deadline. Yeah, maybe it makes a little more sense, but relievers are so volatile year to year. Like, at least if you sign Devin Williams and it blows up in your face, all it cost you was money. It didn't cost you X and Y player that you have to go ahead and watch them blossom somewhere else. I just think it goes down smoother if you trade those guys away for starting pitchers or offensive talent. So yeah, 100% agree there.
Is this where we transition to, is Grayson Rodriguez going to be the option?
This is exactly where we transition to, is Grayson Rodriguez going to be the option?
This episode is brought to you by Progressive Insurance. Do you ever think about switching insurance companies to see if you could save some cash? Progressive makes it easy. Just drop in some details about yourself and see if you're eligible to save money when you bundle your home and auto policies. The process only takes minutes, and it could mean hundreds more in your pocket. Visit Progressive.com after this episode to see if you could save. Progressive Casualty Insurance Company and Affiliates. Potential savings will vary. Not available in all states.
Thursday Night Football is on, and it's only on Prime Video. This week, the AFC North takes center stage as the Pittsburgh Steelers battle the Cincinnati Bengals. Can the Steelers' defense dominate once again? The Steelers bring experience and that signature toughness. The Bengals, they've got young stars and explosive playmakers. It's discipline versus firepower. Exactly what makes this division one of the toughest in football. Coverage begins at 7 p.m. Eastern with football's best party, TNF Tonight, presented by Verizon. Not a Prime member? Not a problem. Simply sign up for a 30-day free trial. It's the Steelers and Bengals, Thursday at 7 p.m. Eastern, only on Prime Video. Restrictions apply. See Amazon.com/Amazon Prime for details.
Weight loss solutions are not one size fits all. Hers makes it simpler to get started and stick with a weight loss plan backed by expert-guided online care that puts your weight loss goals first. These include oral medication kits or compounded GLP-1 injections. Through Hers, pricing for oral medication kits start at just $69 a month for a 10-month plan when paid in full upfront. No hidden fees, no membership fees. You shouldn't have to go out of your way to feel like yourself. Hers brings expert care straight to you with 100% online access to personalized treatment plans that put your goals first. Reach your weight loss goals with help through Hers. Get started at forhers.com/4u to access affordable, doctor-trusted weight loss plans. That's forhers.com/4u, forhers.com/4u. Paid for by Hims and Hers Health. Weight loss by Hers is not available everywhere. Compounded products are not FDA approved or verified for safety, effectiveness, or quality. Prescription required. Restrictions at forhers.com. Apply.
Now, Rodriguez missed all of the 2025 season. The injury woes started for him with a lat issue, and then he ended up having surgery in August to repair some issues with his elbow. Now, he is expected to be healthy for 2026. And in fact, at the season-ending press conference, Michael Elias said that Rodriguez was expected to ramp up his throwing program this month. I think we all know what Rodriguez looks like when he is healthy at this point, which is a very good, if not sometimes electric starter in the major leagues. Coming up through the minors, that is what we expected that he would be. And for the second half of the 2023 season and the first half of 2024, that's kind of what he looks like. But at the same time, we've now had 3 of the last 4 seasons in which Rodriguez either missed all of or a significant portion of the season because of an injury. 2023 has been his only fully healthy season since 2021. So the question is, how do we look at Rodriguez going into this offseason? Is he a rotation piece? Is he a bullpen option? What is he at this point? Because we know what the stuff looks like when he is healthy, but we haven't seen a healthy Grayson Rodriguez now in a while. And Nick, I'll start with you.
Yeah, like it's tough because you can't go into 2026 expecting him to be a major contributor to the rotation. Like I'm not. I know a lot of people are going to be extremely frustrated, but he's 25 years old. And like you said, we know how electric he can be on the mound. He's 25 years old. I'm in no way giving up on Grayson Rodriguez at this point, but it is almost impossible to count on him for 2026 until you see it, until he is on the mound in spring training and he's healthy and there's 0 setbacks. It's the offseason and they could go radio silent and we don't know. Yeah, he's supposed to be throwing right now, starting to ramp up. We may not hear anything for a couple of months. Who knows? So we won't know probably anything until spring training when he's out there on the mound. So that's going to be tough. I don't know. Like, to move him to the bullpen, I get it if he's healthy and you want to say, let's ride this while we can right now. Because the scary part was, right, they were like, we don't know what's causing some of this, like some of the injuries, right? Last year, some of the quotes that he was giving, that's the scary part in this. If you want to say you're healthy, you got your electric stuff back, you're looking good, let's move you to the bullpen. Maybe we can get you through a full season this way. I'm not going to hate it, but like you got to bring in like 2 high quality starting pitchers this offseason. If the rotation is going to be in a much, much better spot, I'm down. But otherwise, like he's still incredibly young. I don't see any reason why you want to give up on him quite yet. And I think you do go into the offseason with every plan and every hope of him joining in the rotation, but fighting for a spot. And he may never end up becoming that ace. He was the top pitching prospect in all of baseball. He may never be the ace. He may never be the number 1. I don't care about that at this point. He can still be a very good, high quality starter in the major league level when he's healthy. But yeah, obviously the health is the biggest concern. But
I agree. You can't go into the season or even the off season counting on him for any role. But I do kind of think that the people that say Grayson Rodriguez, he doesn't exist until I just think it's overblown. He's a pitcher. He didn't blow out his elbow. He didn't get Tommy John. I think any pitcher with the pulse is a constant injury concern. Doesn't matter who you are. Even Corbin Burns just found that out at the beginning of this season. Yeah, I think I could easily see him ramping up again in spring training and boom, Tommy John is required. Or I could see him all of a sudden being healthy for 2 or 3 seasons here. I just don't think we know, but I do agree that you can't count on him as part of your plans, and he's just like a happy bonus at the same time. So I think you have to leave it open. Let's just assume for speculation that he does come into camp healthy, ready to go. He hasn't pitched in a season and a half in regular season games. So yeah, do you want to throw him out there as a starter for a full season? I don't know. Maybe it kind of just happens to work out where they don't get that super high Devin Williams, Ryan Helsley reliever, and Felix is out obviously for this one season. Do you use 2026? He could be the closer. Billy B was right in the Discord, and just that's how you build up his innings, and then you get him back on a starter's workload for 2027, or unless he kind of shows out there and then he just becomes a closer at that point. I don't know. Or do you just plan on him being that incredible fifth starter if you upgrade around him as well and just manages the innings that way? But it will certainly be very interesting to follow in spring training as long as he's healthy.
Yeah, and I brought this up last week when we were talking about Dean Kramer, but I think it's worth repeating here again with Grayson Rodriguez. If you look at the projected Orioles rotation right now, based off the players that are under control for 2026, Dean Kramer is the only one that had a full healthy season. So I have to think that's on Mike Elias's mind this offseason of Kyle Braddis and Tyler Wells are both now about a year and a half removed from Tommy John surgery. They haven't had a full season in a while. Trevor Rogers, that was a knee injury, I believe, that cost him the first month or so of the season. But that's a guy with enough of an injury history that you don't necessarily want to bank on 30 starts of him at the top of the rotation. And then with Rodriguez, this has now been three of the last 4 years that you've had this issue with him either missing all of the season or part of the season. So I think you have to hedge your bets a little bit with Rodriguez because you know how good he can be. But at the same time, if they go into camp with him penciled in as their number 5 and without a good backup option, I'm going to be a little bit concerned because we haven't seen anything from him in a while. And what I would almost prefer at this rate is if the Orioles acquire enough starters, that Rodriguez is more in a middle relief role in the beginning. And I know his ceiling is way, way higher than that. But then at least you have an opportunity to see, okay, can you stretch him out a little bit? Can you make him a starter again? How does he look in a bullpen role? Because do you really want him closing games at this rate? Do you want him set right now as your closer, or would you rather have a couple of more experience, or at least experience in that role, relievers in the back of your bullpen while Rodriguez kind of gets his feet wet in the middle innings where early in the season there are going to be a lot of opportunities. So that's kind of what I would prefer for Rodriguez right now, and just hope that you get enough depth over the offseason that you can put him in the bullpen and see where things go over the first month or so.
All I got from that was Dean Kramer is a ticking time bomb. He's due for an injury. Trade him immediately. No, you make a really good point. I wouldn't be surprised if that's the way they go with Grayson, and I wouldn't hate it. Again, it's just no clue what Grayson Rodriguez 2026 looks like.
If you bring in a couple of arms, you bring in 2 guys. You've got Rogers, you got Bradish. You got Kramer there and Brandon Young, Povich. One of these other guys steps up and has a really strong spring training. And Grayson's good, but maybe you are concerned about how do we get him to the end of the season? Any sense of them? Could he start the year in AAA? And could they slow play him back to the major leagues? Just throwing another avenue out there. That's
interesting. I didn't think of that because certainly has at least one option year left. That would be interesting. Maybe that's how they get him closer experience in AAA to start the year. I don't know. Yeah, something to think about.
As long as he has options and there's not a solidified roster spot for him, you can't rule it out. So, if someone's listening to this thinking, wow, that's a real hot take there by Nick, well, step back for a minute, because do I think it's going to happen? Probably not, but there is a very plausible path for it to happen.
Just throwing something out there for the sake of conversation. It's tough because we know how good he can be, but it's multiple years now, and I don't know. Talking about him now, this is really the first time. When's the last time we talked about Grayson Rodriguez on the show? I don't think it's been a very
Probably
long
March.
time. Yeah, exactly. And now you're thinking about him. It's like I'm already like pumping the brakes. Like, what if he is back? Because man, if Rodriguez is in this rotation last year, things aren't completely different, but the conversation we're having in this entire episode is a lot different.
If he's healthy and on a starter's workload, and he's like your 5th starter because you went out and got Dylan Cease, you have Kyle Bradish, you have Trevor Rogers, you trade for a guy and Grayson Rodriguez, plus you have Tyler Wells, Dean Kramer, Kate Povich, Brandon Young, if any of them aren't included in a trade, plus that AAA depth, I mean, then you're cooking with gas, but we're not living in a stream world.
Let's go now to our final question of the night here, which concerns what's going on in the Arizona Fall League right now. It's worth pointing out that because of some bad weather in Arizona over the last week or so, the Fall League has had a lot of postponements, but we have seen some Orioles get off to promising starts out in the AFL as members of Peoria Javelinas, perhaps none more so than left-hander Luis De Leon, who won Pitcher of the Week for week one of the Arizona Fall League. In his lone outing that week, he struck out 7 batters while allowing 1 hit and walking 2 and allowing an unearned run over 4 innings pitched. In that span, he racked up 11 whiffs on 31 swings, and only one of his 6 batted balls he surrendered was hard hit. So we now have some StatCast data on De Leon, and it was pretty promising over a very, very small sample size, but it's worth pointing out that De Leon, after missing some time to start 2025, put together his best professional season and ended it on a real high note at Double-A Chesapeake. So we were excited about De Leon getting this opportunity in the Arizona Fall League. Now, as we've talked about numerous times, for a lot of reasons, you have to take AFL stats with a huge grain of salt, especially because it is a league that is particularly disadvantaged, but is at a particular disadvantage to pitchers. But if De Leon goes out there and has a solid season, what is that going to do for his prospect stock going into 2026? Because I think the 3 of us are already high on him, but I get the feeling that there's going to be a lot more national buzz if he pitches well out in the AFL.
Yeah, you said it's just one outing, but it was very good. And I don't think it was really different from what he did all year in 2025. He just got to do it with more eyeballs on him. There's over 200 minor league teams on the regular season. So like on a national level, a lot of prospects like De Leon get overlooked. And now in the AFL, there's 6 teams, 3 games a day, sometimes 2 games a day. And everyone, I'm sure if the 3 of us could, we would spend this month out there in the Arizona Fall League. I would. But a lot of people who follow prospects, they have all converged out there in Arizona for the next couple of weeks. And so a lot more people are getting eyes on him, and you can take some time and dissect what he's doing. And I think you're already seeing that. Like Fangraphs had a piece out. They covered like 6 AFL prospects on the rise after just the first week, and De Leon was included. And in that piece, I forget, it was James Fegan who wrote that over at Fangraphs, not Eric Longenhagen. But James said, look, he thinks that De Leon is going to get bumped up from a 45 future value prospect to a 50 future value prospect. He's already showing better command. He's touching 98.5 in the AFL. He's sitting 96.5. And he also mentioned that De Leon is probably going to be in the conversation for top 100 when spring rolls around. So I think you're already seeing the effects of what a positive year can have on De Leon, which is really good. But at the same time, it's like we just sat here and talked about trades and how you improve the rotation. It's like, how many teams are already, if the Orioles are going to be active on the trade market, how many of those discussions already have Luis De Leon's name included in it? And how many more teams are going to be calling about Luis De Leon? Or if Mike Elias calls and said, all right, package starts with Luis De Leon. If he's not in it, the deal's off. Because it's not about the results. I don't care really what the box score says with a lot of these AFL starts. Now that we have full data, it looks like every park is having the StatCast data this year. So we get the full look at these guys. And under the hood, like De Leon, I'm even higher on him, honestly.
Same here. Yeah, I'm very worried that he could be traded this offseason. Not that it wouldn't be like a decent move while his value is at this point, has reached this point. Even Baseball America, I feel like, is like shouting out his performance in the AFL as well as Fangraphs. Like if he's what it takes to get you, in that Hunter Green, whatever conversation, Joe Ryan, then it's probably worth it. But at the same time, at this point, I'm starting to get so high on him that I'm like, don't do it. Don't do it. To me, it's like Trey Gibson and Luis De Leon at this point are my top 2 pitching prospects potentially. It's really tough right now. So nothing finalized, but I've never been higher on Luis De Leon, and we've been pretty high on him for a long time. So yeah, great stuff going out there in the AFL. Hopefully he can continue the success throughout the the entire season. And yeah, those numbers, the metrics are pretty good looking. I like it a lot.
Yeah, I have a feeling when the Fall Stars game rolls around in a few weeks, we'll be talking about him and possibly some other Orioles making that game. And we'll have AFL coverage as we get further into the offseason. And with that, that does it for this episode. We will be back next week. Maybe there will be some news on the managerial search by then. Let's see what happens between now and then. In the meantime, you can check us out on our many social media channels, including Facebook, Instagram, Threads, X, TikTok, YouTube, Blue Sky, and Twitch. We're also over at Substack, OriolesOnTheVerge.substack.com. And while you're browsing around the internet, be sure to head over to Patreon and sign up to become a member today. It's a $3, $5, and $10 levels to have access from bonus coverage from the three of us, as well as our upcoming Top 50 Prospects Countdown. As I mentioned at the top of the show, we're going to be starting that. Sometimes we get in like late fall, early winter. So that's going to be our countdown leading up to the main reveal of the top 50 in February. That's something we've been doing for patrons now for the last few years. You're not going to want to miss that and more bonus coverage over the off season. So be sure to head over to patreon.com now to check that out. For Bob Phelan and Nick Stevens, this is Zach Sped. You've been listening to Orioles on the Verge, part of the Believe Podcast Network.